Welcome, folks, to the Knights of the Wrong Table podcast. As always, I'm John.
Randall.
So yeah, I was down to a nail biter for you last night with you and Jeffy at Fantasy, huh?
So yeah, let's start with fantasy. It's a nice safe space that we all can mostly relate to. To set the table, I was 3-0 going into the week, and everyone has their arch fantasy nemesis. Mine happens to be a good mutual buddy of ours, Jeff. He
Jeffy.
seemingly always beats me in the worst possible moments. So going in, a little nervous, pulled away a decisive win. I still have a player to play tonight, and I already have a 3-point lead on him. And I think that means I might be good, unless my guy gets several fumbles and I happen to have one of those catastrophic nights. I think I got the win, 4-0.
There you go.
How you doing?
Yeah, I'm definitely 2-2. I went up against, I can't remember his name. One of your buddies, is it Stefan? I can't remember his name.
I think it's Stefan.
Who's got Allen and Mahomes on his team, and they absolutely whooped me. So having Saquon and Jonathan Taylor wasn't quite enough to best him. So yeah, 2-2, and I think I sent you the thing on Instagram that was the the Family Guy meme of going into the waiver wire. It's like the 0-3 guy who's sitting there, and Peter walks in as the 1-2 guy, and Chris is like, "There's nothing here. There's no one here."
Turns the light on. He's just sitting in the dark in silence.
There's no hope here. There's no players. There's literally no one to pick up. They're gone.
Yeah, dude. We're in a 12-person league, and it's 2 quarterbacks. Well, it's one quarterback with an ultimate flex spot. So most people field 2 quarterbacks. It gets really, really deep, and which, hey, hit the trade market, man. Maybe you'll find something. People don't like trading with me. They think that I'm, bad or something. I have this reputation or something. I don't know.
Maybe Tom will trade with me. Who knows?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, never know. And then yeah, so here in Seattle and you down near PDX, we're pretty stoked for the Mariners making being the division champs for the first time since 2001. So that's pretty cool. I know one of my buddies was hopping on for tickets for one of the games and was in like a big queue of like 1,500 people. And then I think that he was going for game 2 and then had to settle for game 3, but still like $500-600 a piece. Crazy.
I remember back when we were in college, tickets to Mariners games were like $9 and you can go sit out in the bleachers.
Oh yeah.
They were that bad for a while there. They've always been classically kind of a farm team in my mind.
The Yankee farm team.
They develop good players and then they go on and play for someone else and be really famous. Yeah. But I remember the early years, the 97, Ken Griffey and Edward Martinez and Randy Johnson back then, and early
Ichiro. Yep.
That was a good squad. Right. A-Rod was on that too. Alex Rodriguez.
Yep, and then, leading into 2001 with 116 wins, still a record that hasn't been broken. It was tied by the Mariners in 2001, but still hasn't been broken to this day. So that's pretty cool. So going back to like baseball games when we were in college, it's a lot different now though. I don't know if have you been to a baseball game since the invention of the pitch clock? Have you went and
I have
been to a game in person?
Yeah, speeds it up. The whole thing just goes a lot faster.
Yeah, and it's a lot. I mean, I can see why they do it for TV, but just if you're trying to enjoy the game there in person, I don't like it because normally, like you said, you can buy your $9 tickets, you can mosey around, you can spend the first 3-4 innings in the beer garden or even more. You can just be there hanging out, get a good view, and then head up to your nosebleeds that you paid nothing for inning 7 through 9, just hanging out, or never go to your seats either. But now it's just
especially if you're going to a game. Being in Seattle, we're kind of on an island up here. We're the farthest team from any other team, I think, in geographical miles. But if you're down like in Los Angeles and you have multiple baseball teams that you can go see, or you're out in the East Coast and there's multiple baseball stadiums, maybe you can go to experience a new stadium you haven't been to, and you spend most of the game just walking around looking at Wrigley Field or something. A lot of these are famous, cool stadiums. Fenway, cool.
Yeah, and we are the only one till California, right? Till well, it would have been Oakland. Are they still playing in Oakland, or have
No,
they
they're in
moved?
Sacramento currently.
Yeah.
They're
So I mean,
finishing the season. I think they're gonna be there for, like, 2 more years, and then they
yeah,
move to Vegas. They're still building a stadium in Vegas.
yeah. So I mean, you got them in Sacramento, and then you got them. What would it be? The Rockies, I think, would be the
Yeah.
closest, or the Diamondbacks, because there's
Yeah,
nothing in
Seattle's
Nevada.
on a geographical island.
Yeah.
Till Portland gets the team.
I've heard something that the Trailblazers might be relocating to the Seattle
Oh, fuck,
market.
nah, that's not happening. I don't think so. That'd be crazy. That'd be
Yeah,
crazy.
that
The
would be a sad
Supersonics
day
left, man.
for
Who
your
knows? Anything can
guys'.
happen.
That'd be a sad day for your guys' only pro sport, though. That sure would be.
Hey, we have
So,
the Timbers.
oh, soccer, yeah, yeah, yep,
Yeah, we have the Timbers.
yeah. I mean,
I am a lifelong Timbers fan. Been going to games for years. Season ticket holder now in my 15th year. No, 16th year. I'm looking at my trophy cabinet right here that's got multiple signatures and pictures of me with multiple players on the field and hanging out with a bunch of cool people. And yeah, lifelong Timbers fan. PTFC, RC, TID.
you and all those rabble rousers down there in war torn Portland, right? Just go from the
Yeah,
soccer
it's
game right
you know,
to
you go down,
causing the rabble.
you put your face mask on, you know, your face covering on, and you kiss your loved ones goodbye, and you might not make it home, but Portland's a unique place, and it's very interesting with the obviously the comments were made by Donald Trump that sending the military into Portland, Oregon, which is it's really funny because a lot of the videos and from what my knowledge of his comments that he made, that motivated him to make his comments was he was shown a lot of videos by his staff from like 5-6 years ago in Portland.
Yeah,
And I don't know if you guys remember what was going on 5 or 6 years ago, but you know, Portland was in a not so good place. The Donald Trump administration the first time around was specifically really bad on Portland, Oregon. Just because of if you give the city a reason to protest, the people in this city will protest every
it's like a
single day.
little France.
It's yeah, absolutely. We love our freedom of speech and our you know ability to go voice it. Portland's a city divided by a river, and it has multiple bridges. Those bridges are closed multiple weekends throughout the summer for protests. And it's just a fact of the city. It's Portland and Oregon. It's always kind of been a outcast kind of, you know, place where people end up. It's a little bit like Alaska in that way. You kind of go to escape your problems, you'd run to Portland.
Yeah,
um there's a big homeless, you know, population, or unhoused, excuse me, population in the city of Portland. And it kind of got treated during the first Trump administration as like the black dog boogeyman for a classic bad city, which is really funny because at the same time, Seattle had going on the Chaz PD area.
yeah.
The If you remember that,
Oh
that was
yeah.
at the same time, and Portland got more flack than Chaz did.
I don't know if it got more or less flack, but yeah, definitely was a crazy time, you know, the uh when the protesters for I mean a combination of COVID protesting and Black Lives Matter protesting, setting up the CHOP, the like their own little Pretoria, if you're
And
familiar with
anti-Trump
Family Guy.
protests too that were
Yeah,
happening.
yep.
Because this was
So
all
it's
happening. Remember, this is things people like to forget conveniently. Not you, but people. 2020 was Donald Trump's administration. The COVID happened under Donald Trump's administration. The responses from every city in the United States were under Donald Trump's administration.
yeah,
So
so if you want to go setting the record straight of us not protesting during COVID and this and that, it's anyways, that's in the episode before if you want to go listen to that. But kind of wanted to talk too about so in Portland, right? You know, you have the right to protest, and at any chance, protests happen as they should, you know, and kind of wanted to emphasize what we viewed a little bit when people want to say far left extremists or Antifa or what have you. I think that one thing that sums it up pretty clear for me is that right now what you're seeing from the left is definitely frustration of infringements on civil liberties, and civil rights, right? Whereas if you look at what's happening on the right now with right wing violence, definitely uh, motivated by uh, white nationalism, extremism, motivated by potentially what happens when your religion tells you that you are superior to another person. It's easy to dehumanize, right? So, and seeing the differences there, right? We're seeing violence on going around. Definitely one seems a little bit more, right? When we talk about top down, one seems definitely more reaction to abuses of power, whereas one seems more of entrenching power, making people afraid,
Forcing
right?
even.
Yeah, enforcing. So, kind of then leads into this idea that is interesting to me because, right, in the South and some other places and like in country music, right, there used to be a phrase, right? Johnny Cash being a bootlegger, not a bootlicker, right? Someone who would stand up for those that are oppressed rather than helping those that are already in power get more power. And kind of how that then goes into where we're at with guns today. So, just how ingrained things are today with guns being the tool to entrench power, right? How it's just ingrained into our ethos as Americans. So, Randall, how do you think we got there, from the historical perspective of like guns as our ethos here in America?
To my knowledge, I struggle to think of another country that has more like of an entwined relationships with firearms than the United States. Specifically, like the idea of moving west and the battles after with the French Indian War, the War of 1812, the Spanish American War, the wars against Native American tribes in the movement west. All of those were fought with firearms, and in most other countries before I don't want to say modern invention of firearms because they've been around a long time, but I'm saying like in a war front area, it was one nation versus another nation. Whereas in the United States, every person was encouraged to be armed because there's bears out there. There's still an unsettled sense to the place you live in. It's a lot like
Yeah.
when modern day Alaska. Alaska is a dangerous place, or Australia even. Australia would be another very good example where there's just a lot
Yeah.
of stuff that's dangerous outside. It's best to wear a firearm. And when you possess that mentality from the early 1700s through till modern day now, there's not really that need in my mind for like the danger sense of animals outside or robber barons or robbers outside, highwaymen, whatever have you. um because we live in a more civilized area, we still are left with this extreme connection in history and culture, popular culture, machismo type of attitude of
Right.
firearms. But
The
I
John
don't
Wayne
I don't
country western films and everything,
yeah, like
right? So,
how many gun duels do you see these days
yeah.
in like a gentlemanly sense, in like your Alexander Hamilton sense? Like it's an outdated part of our culture, but for some reason is everyone still owns several guns. I mean, I own
Yeah.
several guns.
As do I.
um it's I use my firearms, every one I have, for hunting. I have multiple long guns for hunting, and I have I don't own any handguns, but I I do own one rifle that's kind of neat with an interesting story. My grandfather was a big pawn shop advocate, which I'm sure you can
We'll get there.
speak
Yeah, for
on.
sure.
But he purchased one day at a pawn shop. He used to collect antique weapons and cool weapons, and he found one day at a pawn shop a Savage 30-30 rifle, understock rifle, um, that was made in 1913 and issued to the Canadian cavalry, and then it was used in war in Gallipoli.
Well,
And
okay.
he found this at a pawn shop, and then just owned it, and then it got passed down through family to me. And then I did a bunch of research and history of the gun, and then tried to find out like who it was issued to, and I found the cavalry unit in Canada. It was out of Toronto. but I didn't find the specific soldier. Always thought that would be really cool. But long story short, yeah, I think that that America has this just entwined relationship with the cowboys and the West. Um, Not very many countries have that so tangible, close connection with their recent past because
Right.
Russia's been around for 2,000 years. China's been around for 2,000 years. We're a new country.
We are a new
Um,
nation for sure. Yeah.
so it's something, we're still developing, in that sense when it comes to building our own identities and cultures here. And I think the guns, unfortunately, are a entwined part of it.
Yeah. And how definitely today, I think even more so than like the machismo of like the big revolver on the hip and the, um, right, like how guns won the West in a sense, right? There's the idea that permeates conservatism right now, which is that guns are for fighting tyranny, right? And how kind of just what my opinion, what we've seen is that you can make the argument that we've seen infringements of civil liberties from both sides over the years, right? And other than the little skirmishes with the FBI, right, with some of these cults and stuff like that, there really hasn't been a true mass, right? Like, we haven't used the Second Amendment to fight tyranny in a modern sense, right? And then we're left with then the consequence and the fallout of that, right? So, and I definitely was someone of the mindset that, was a staunch Second Amendment supporter and definitely, I'm not that I'm not, but I viewed it differently, right? So, I was definitely ingrained as far as guns being a part of my culture. Grew up at gun clubs. My dad was a quote unquote professional trap shooter on one of the West Coast circuits here. I grew up in a hunting family as well and had free access to firearms from elementary age on, right? Something that I look at now and it's like, I'm glad that nothing ever happened, just because things can happen, right? So, and I mean, it was a different time, but it's still pretty close to where we're at now. It wasn't that long ago. So, um, right. And then even, right, guns were always used as tools. And I remember growing up that I wasn't even really allowed to have like Nerf guns or squirt guns and stuff because guns in my family, it's like you didn't mess around with even like pretending to point someone at something. It was like, it was there was a deference towards like the act of holding a gun and pointing it, right? That's what you're not doing that unless unless it's for sport or unless it's for protection, right? And kind of how that's different than obviously how I raise my kids now is we just limit the access, right? And then you can have more fun with it. So just a different kind of growing up for me. And then also my dad owns a pawn shop in the area here in Puget Sound and worked for him for quite a while and would sell guns and it was always around guns and carried a gun while I was at work. So it's definitely something is that was part of my ethos, right? Like guns were definitely a huge part of my identity. I look back at things that could have happened with them being a part of my identity, and I'm glad that bad things didn't happen, but it didn't mean that it couldn't have happened and it couldn't have happened for someone else too, right? And kind of like I talked about the big shift for me working in schools with immigrant children, right? Being a huge shift in my politics, working in schools um, when I became a teacher was definitely the big turning point for me with how I view the Second Amendment and how I look at, you know, we are saying that these things are for tyranny and we're saying that these things are to protect our liberties. And I don't see them being used for that. All I see them for is for entrenching power and for terrifying terrifying the public, to be honest. You know, the number one cause of death for children now in the United States is guns over childhood cancer, over car accidents. I believe that it used to be car accidents. Now it's guns. And that's just a horrible statistic in my eyes. And like One of the phrases that Randall's been using throughout the podcast is it's a uniquely American experience, right? There are some things that go on in America that are uniquely American, and the gun violence epidemic is definitely one of them, right? So I went through that paradigm shift when I started working in schools, and you go into lockdowns or you have a kid bring in a hyper realistic airsoft gun that you think is real and you have to respond. That's something that happened to me. And it just makes you think about, it makes you question things, right? And I know that in my family, in my immediate family, I have more people than not that work in schools, and I have children in school. So it's something that I definitely feel differently about it now than when I grew up, for sure. I think, Randall, you probably feel the same with, the skin that you have in the game too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting with the gun death of Charlie Kirk happening on the exact same day as a mass shooting at a school in Colorado, that the gun killing of a political, podcaster figure would be the one bit of over news that would shadow this other news, that this mass shooting in Colorado was the first time in, to my knowledge and history, where a survivor of a school mass shooting had a child who is now a survivor of a school shooting, as there were parents that had children at that school in Colorado that had this, that were multiple children. I think it was like four or five
Yeah.
kids, four kids were shot.
Yeah.
um there are parents that have kids there who were survivors from the Columbine massacre during the what was that, mid 2000s, early 2000s, like 2004.
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
it's just one of
Absolutely.
those things where, like I said, you, you always have the people who will argue that like guns don't kill people and it's people who kill people, and if you take the guns away, they'll just find another mean to do it. And I completely and utterly and 1,000% will always disagree.
Yeah.
It's the convenience and of killing and the detachment of killing. If you watch enough of these psycho dramas, these crime dramas that are on Netflix all the time, where it's like, the Ted Bundy story, or let's listen to John Wayne Gacy from his side, that type of stuff, all these new things that are showing you these serial killers. One of the first things they say is like, oh, I decided to start shooting people because I stabbed a person once and it was just way too personal. Like they
Right.
don't, there's a psychological part there that is there's a lesson to where it's like, if you shoot someone with a gun, there's a detachment to that. I mean, yeah,
Right.
you still get the end result of what you want. You're causing chaos, you're causing death, you're causing destruction, harm, but it's not immediate on the effect. And if you even look at like the psychological effect killing has on a mass scale, they did tests with that in the early 1940s in Germany, where they had to figure out a way to commit mass killings that wouldn't psychologically damage um the
Yeah. To make it
perpetrators.
less personal for the Germans.
And so
Right.
like, yeah,
Yeah.
so like I think it's something that where it's the access and ease of use, and then the psychological, again, ease of committing that type of act comparatively to like a stabbing or a
Yeah.
strangulation or something.
Well, and
um
then look at also with hunting, right? Like when you pull the trigger on an animal, that's like the easy part. That's the adrenaline part, right? Kind of the more spiritual part of it could even be in dressing the animal, right? The more intimate part of hunting for sport, right? And, you know,
I go hunting with another mutual friend of ours, Burgers. A good friend of ours, his name is Burgers. But I go hunting with him, and this guy he'll shoot a duck, he'll shoot a turkey, he'll shoot a deer, but when it comes to dressing the animals,
yeah.
he uses his fingertips, and he
Uh-huh.
tries to not touch anything, and
Right.
it's like, dude, the inside of that animal is cleaner than your hands are now. I
Yeah.
guarantee it. And
Right.
but it's just that there's that connection part where, it's people are squeamish, and
Right. And
it's
it's like doctors who have to then work on it's it's doctors who have to work on victims of gun violence, right? And people on the right will want to discredit their experience, saying, "Oh, well, you know, of course you're going to work on people with gunshots. You're at a hospital and you see it all the time. We're not going to listen to you." And it's like, are you? And you know, I know that that's what they say because honestly, there's a point at which I thought that was true, and I just don't. And so, kind of part of this podcast is to tell people who are in that perversion with guns and who are in that perversion of they're for tyranny and we need to be able to keep what we want, anything we want. And I'm telling you, if you work in a school, there's not a day that goes by that you don't think about it. There's not a day that goes by that you think, am I going to have to make the decision of going back to my kids or saving these kids?
Well, yeah, and it's not even on the gun owner too. Like maybe you are a responsible gun owner. Maybe you do things right, and maybe you would never commit, a horrible thing like this. But that's not to say that your social network addicted child who's having a bad day in college or high school or something might have access to that weapon and makes a
Right.
horrible decision.
That's what it
There
is. It's
it's
a horrible decision. Their frontal cortex isn't formed yet. And when they have free access, right, things can happen, right? Like I look back to me having free access as a child, and I'm thankful every day that nothing happened, that I didn't decide to go and do that because I very well could have. And it's crazy. It's crazy to me now, and I'm not trying to rag too much on how I was brought up, but there could have been something that happened. So
I always look at people though who are like, I don't know. We played sports and we had mutual friends of ours that even in college would go out and they'd buy an AR and they'd spend so much money, just so much money on like putting things on it and kitting it out the way they want it and
I got
getting
your
it painted the way
EOTech
they
and
want it.
your nice stock and all your
Yeah,
Magpul
and a paint kit,
accessories and
get some speckled
yeah,
stuff on there so it glows in the
yeah.
dark. And it's just like I can't like I used to paintball when I was a kid.
Not how I would do it.
I lived in California and I had several paintball
Used to
guns and
paintball as
several
well.
it just
Yep.
feels a lot like that. Like it's a social thing. You see a kid walking around with
Right.
a spider and you're like, "Oh, he can't afford that." And then you see a kid walking around with an angel and you're like, "Whoa." You know?
Yeah.
Those are
I was
those are
walking around
paintball
with
guns.
a Tippmann 98
The
custom, bruh.
98 custom, baby. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Got the
But
job done.
it's one of those things where it's just become a status symbol too and people like to spend money on it and then it's like, "Well, hey, what are you going to do with that?" And then there's just a long, awkward pause. And then it's always either one or two things. There's, well, God forbid everyone opens my door in the middle of the night and tries to steal from me. Or there's the, well, I got to keep this in order to fight tyranny from the government. And like both of which are just so obnoxious, just
Yeah.
so obnoxious.
And like I had mentioned, it's th- from my observation from what people will say, right? I don't believe that we're under tyranny in COVID, really. I do believe there was a great wealth transfer that happened as a result of it, and I'm pissed off about that personally. Big wealth transfer to the top. However, as far as from a civil rights perspective, we talked about this last episode, right? Some of those people are making the argument that their civil rights were infringed, right? No one took to the streets in the name of tyranny. But how many school shootings have we had since those people called tyranny and called that their civil liberties were being infringed? How many kids have died in the name of that, right? So it's how many are we going to sacrifice along the way until like the Second Amendment is used for what all these people think it's used for. So
I think it's interesting too if you read the Second Amendment, by fact, by law, it's a well-regulated militia being necessity to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And I think it's always really interesting because whenever people talk about the Second Amendment, the only sentence in that they want to say is the
Shall not be
the
infringed.
the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Like even if you
So
Google
that's the
it and you
tattoos
ask,
people get, is the shall not be infringed and
well,
all
yeah,
that stuff.
and it's the right to keep and bear arms, but it doesn't say anything about no one ever talks about the regulated militia part, and
Right.
that's the defining thing that I think is really interesting with with specifically when you look at the Second Amendment and how you have these Second Amendment constitutionalists or constitutionalist people in the world that want to be, take the word the word as law, as fact, word for word. Well, it's like, why do you leave out the militia part then? Because the
Why do you
militia
not talk
part,
about all? Why do you not talk about all persons when we're talking about civil liberties and due process?
why not just say all persons should have the right to bear arms, the right to keep and bear arms in this state? But it specifically says, in order for militias to function,
Yeah.
you need to have weapons. So in my mind, if you're going to be on like the side of, oh well, we have to keep constitutionalist, perfect, you should go join a militia with your AR. If you're not a member of a militia, then you shouldn't have a weapon, because it says, in order for a well-regulated militia being a necessary to the state to the security of a free state.
Yeah.
Go join a militia.
And it's
It's
like,
interesting
then
that
does
people
that
always
mean?
leave that part out. I just always find
It's
that
like,
funny.
does that mean like your own, like, militia group? Does that mean like the National
No,
Guard?
it's
Does that mean the
specific. No, it
reserves?
doesn't. It actually specifically says a well-regulated militia. So
Right.
not just me and my buddies are going to form a militia. We're going to form a posse. That's not what that's not a well-regulated militia. There's state militias you can join. Look at the Montana state militia. It's like one of the largest what is it? Volunteer armies in the world. The Montana
Really?
militia.
I didn't know that. Yeah, and it's like yeah, and the whole, like you're saying, right? Like thinking back to college days and guys getting out their ARs and stuff, right? For the lifestyle, right? For more, just like you buy a truck and you put a lift kit on it, right? So, and I mean, I'm not saying that trucks with lift kits aren't dangerous, right? Visibility out of a lifted F-150 is worse than a semi truck, right? So, those are dangerous as well. I'm not hating on that. It's just a matter of fact, as far as we're left here wondering, like, what really the solution is. I'm still more in like the feelings processing of a lot of this, just because um having worked in schools and having, you know, school age children, right? Having family members that work in schools, it's like I don't necessarily have a solution. What I'm trying to call is that I had a change in the heart that really makes me see it for what it is. And I'm not saying they're not necessary. I'm saying that it's what's worth. We're at this crossroads where we're losing children daily, right? More than other countries to this. And just like Charlie Kirk said, right? Some gun deaths then are necessary for the Second Amendment to protect other amendments in the Constitution, which I don't necessarily disagree with, but it's where are we going to say it's enough? Like, how many deaths is it going to be enough that we
I just don't
maybe have
understand
a fifth?
what it's enough for. Like
Right.
what
What
is
is
the
it all
benefit of
for?
it? Like
And right, I
what is
don't
the
see any, to be honest.
like what's the benefit of the Second Amendment, to be 100% honest? And people in the comments can be laughing about, this guy doesn't even understand the benefit of having a weapon. But like
No, I do. I
the
definitely
the
do.
the United States government
I was
has,
born into weapons.
well, yeah, but the United States government has cruise missiles. Like
Can
your
you
AR is
compete with?
cute.
Yeah.
They'll blow up your house. Your AR is cute. They'll do it from a drone, from the sky.
Yep.
Have you ever heard of Robert J. Matthews?
I have not.
No, this is Bob Matthews. Was a American neo-Nazi and founder and leader of the Order, American white supremacist militant group that committed several counterfeiting, bank robberies, car heists, murders, political assassinations. Yeah, have you heard of this guy?
Mm-mm.
So Bob Matthews was around. He was born in 1953 and he died in 1984. And he was a huge member of like the white supremacist movement in the early 90s, or excuse me, 90s, in the early 80s and late 70s. That was like responsible for like the Hayden Lake stuff, where there's the American Nazi group in Idaho. He was famously, if you look it up, I think it was Whigby Island, might have been Vashon. I think it was
Yeah,
Whigby Island. We're gonna say Whigby as of right now. But Bob Matthews was one of those guys, kind of like the Randall Weaver in out in Idaho and Ruby Ridge, where it was the scene of like his story was politicized after his death. There you go. That's the guy. Yeah, he basically was robbed a bunch of banks and was a white supremacist that had a militant group that would dole out illegal weapon sales across the West Coast. And he was tracked to his cabin on Whigby Island, and the feds surrounded his cabin, and um, they got into a gunfight with him. And I think someone shot something into the building that ignited like his stores of black powder, and the whole building went up in flames. But there was hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of guns in this guy's building. And you know, it's just, it's interesting how many of these white supremacist groups also run heavily with the militant neo-Nazi, like militia. Again, there's your militias. But they, how those are always kind of entwined together. And there's a lot of examples of that, like the Ruby Ridge incident with Randall Weaver. That one's a little bit more gray area, to be from my perspective, you know, wanting to use it as an example. But that also had to do with illegal weapon sales and neo-Nazis and white supremacist organizations. So I think that there's a connection that, even going back to like, this isn't a recent thing, is what I'm trying to say. This
right.
connection with white separatists and white supremacists, and using weapons in a political mass shootings or political violence. This goes back, you know, into the 70s and the 80s, and then it goes even back even further that for assassinations into the 60s. So it's kind of, it's almost become laughable, except for the topic of the subject we're talking about is so
Right.
horrible that,
Yeah.
you know, the Cato Institute, I think, was that did the 90 or 75-76% of political violence is committed by the right. You know, so it's
Yeah.
just it's crazy. It's crazy that we have to even talk about it in order to like set the bar straight. But when you have the reviews being deleted from you know, the statistic websites, that makes it difficult for people to keep up to date.
Well, and it's all right. It's by design. So there's no accident there, right? And it goes back to the idea, right, where we talk about what we see with the left and how the right now wants to call the left the violent political party with the protesting and whatever else might be going on, right? You want to say rioting with ICE, this, that, how you really have to look at it that that's people who are fed up with the civil liberties being infringed. And the same people who were saying that people should have done something during COVID are the same people that are decrying this as far left violence, right? And
Well,
how
even if your liberties were infringed upon in COVID, what way would it like require you to get, you know, revenge on the government or revenge on like who, you know what I'm saying? Like
yeah,
like
yeah,
like if someone told you to you have to take this vaccine in order to work in this public space, and you refuse to do it, so now you feel like your civil liberties were infringed upon. But what was the lasting damage? Like,
right.
if you didn't take the vaccine, what was the lasting damage?
Well, you can see that it lasted on them as far as with getting revenge. Then with Kimmel, everyone was jumping to comment, well, it's a private employer. They can do what they want to do. Private employers have fired people for less, and they fired people during COVID for not getting the vaccine. So, and it's right. That's not morals. It's revenge. It's your idea, right, of revenge, right? And then, like Randall's saying, with the gun violence and the uniquely American experience of a lot of this then right-wing violence and violence from white supremacist organizations, right? Now it's being covered up or not covered up, it's harder to find the facts, right? Because apparently we're in this postmodern or this post-facts world, right? But I'm pretty sure that it's the same party that said, fuck your feelings,
I mean,
right?
there was the assault at the, or excuse me, the burning down and mass shooting at the church in Michigan just yesterday.
Right.
Um, Guy drives his truck into the side of the building and gets out and starts shooting people and lights the building on fire. I think as of now, there's 4 or 5 deaths. They're still pulling people out from the burned down building. And like, I don't want to sit here and be like, again, I've already made claims about right wing violence being obviously factually more prevalent. Um, but it's too soon to make any comments about anyone's political, stances. But it's just it's insane how uh often this happens to the point where we get desensitized to it, and the first thing we think about is, please don't let this be a guy on my side.
Right.
And then that kind of lessens and cheapens what happened. Like a church was burned down. People were in a church. Thoughts and prayers, you know, to them. That's all you can say these days. But they were literally in the act of thinking and praying when this happened. And this happens to churches a lot more often in America than I think than I think it's schools and churches
Yeah.
are where this stuff happens.
Schools and churches and malls and supermarkets, right? Even more so, I think, than events, right? Like I kind of have in the back of my mind to be worried when I go to like events or a music festival or concert or something. But it's like, you know, those places have security, right? Like unless the breach happens at security or unless it happens in like the campground or the parking lot, right? Like you're pretty safe in there, right? And I do see the argument on the right. Then it's like, well, there are places where there historically aren't guns, but I know that in our society that it's unrealistic to think that we can get rid of them all, right? And it's unrealistic to think that we'll never have any gun deaths. But it just, to me, it doesn't seem like throwing more guns at it is really the answer, right? Like I thought about when I was a teacher, I was like, oh, if they offered a class for me to be able to, if they offered a class for me to be able to carry a weapon as a teacher, I would maybe do it, right? And then in the back of my mind too, though, is that it's just one more gun that a kid can get a hold of, right? Like,
Yeah.
am I wearing it on my hip? Am I brandishing it? Right? Do I conceal it? Do I keep it at my desk? Right? So I don't really think that's the answer. And then, right, I think about then is the answer, right, metal detectors in schools and all this. But if you know anything about schools in Washington, it's that we have portables. And portables are disconnected from the main campus. So are you going to put a metal detector in front of every portable? What are you going to do? Are you going to have security? Yeah, some of these schools around here have 20 portables. What are you going to do to make sure that those are secure? Right. And I think that's where what I'm trying to kind of my testimony to people is that it really comes in the change of a heart, right? That we're in the United States, we have a perverse obsession with firearms, right? We look at, there was in Pierce County, there was uh, would be a would be school shooter who had a manifesto, was planning to do harm to a local school here. But
There
when
was also the
they,
one in on the Fort Lewis, the army guy who just earlier in the summer got arrested. He had a closet full of Nazi paraphernalia and
yeah,
and a ton of weapons. The AP wrote an article about it. See if I can find it.
oh, you got it there? Yeah. I do remember commenting on that. I sent that link to you, and I think that I said, I wonder who this person voted for, too. But there's one party that you vote for right now in America. There's one party you vote for if you are that way. Not saying that everyone who votes that way is, but if you are that way, there's only one option to vote. So, right, and real quick then going back to the kid was the photo from the police was a literal stockpile, right, of ARs and things that can definitely do a bunch of harm. Wasn't a bunch of bolt action rifles and Benelli pumps and stuff. It was the good stuff, right?
The judge is considering whether to release a 13-year-old accused of planning a mass shooting. Deputies arrested him 3 weeks ago after they say he posted threatening messages on social media. At the boy's home, investigators say they found dozens of guns, ammunition, AR-style magazines, and several writings about school shootings. In court on Monday, his mother and the defense team asked the judge to release the teen back to his parents and allow him to attend school.
The court allows him to go to in-person school. He has no objection to going into the office and having his backpack checked every time he arrives at the school. The court does not want him in person schooling. He has no objection to doing online schooling.
The judge will decide in 2 weeks if he will be released.
And then I think back to then that kid had free access to them, right? They weren't locked up. They weren't in safes. They weren't
just hung on the wall. They're a point of pride for the people who own them.
Correct. And the thing is that that's why I agree with what Washington has done here, where it's you can live your life however you want, right? But the new laws with the gun storage laws here in Washington are if a kid gets a hold of your gun, they're going to come to your house and they're going to say, how did the kid get this? And if you don't have a safe and the safe isn't cracked open, or if the kid had the combo to the safe, then it's your ass that's going to jail, right? And I think that needs to be the approach, because I'm just lucky with my free access to firearms. Me and my family we're lucky, right? I could have been showing something to a friend, I could have had a bad day, right? And you never know. So, it's not to say that if you have free access, it's going to happen. It's that just like with the suicide statistic, right? Where if you buy a gun, more often than not, the only person that gun's going to be used on is its owner, right? Because you have the access to it. So, and it's kind of like what we were talking about, right? With like stabbing versus shooting. It's such a quick decision that it doesn't even give you time for regret. So, yeah. It's a heavy topic, right? It's a heavy topic, and I don't really, yeah.
I think that in the United States, we have, especially in guys your and I's age, we have the responsibility to do something in our age, because like people could say, oh, I don't think we can round up every gun off the street. There's always going to be, if you make guns illegal, then only the bad guys will have them. And like with that argument it's like nothing will ever get done because it's difficult is like over the course of how many guns would get off the streets immediately. And coming from a family, John, like yourselves, that had the pawn shop business, if you just liquidated all guns existing in pawn shops with federal buyback programs, and did some way to limit the amount of guns over time, to funnel it down to the point where then it is extremely difficult to get a firearm on the streets. I mean, right. There's always going to be illegal weapon sales, and there's going to be ghost guns and stuff like that. Like there was that kid in Washington State who printed 23 guns with his 3D printer. There's going to be stuff like that, but in the coming age of digital insecurity that we have here in the United States, where you got to ask yourself, where'd that kid get the files in order to figure out how to print those guns? Online. So why don't we make it so if you download this file, you're now probably on a list and someone's going to come knock at your door. Like there's ways to set up to enforce some form of decorum on these laws, but like we have to do something that makes it, so stuff gets cycled out of the public sphere. If you have a father or a family member who's really into guns, and then he passes, what happens to his collection? It's, to most people, they just see dollar signs and then they go sell it somewhere. And so then when they sell it somewhere, it gets recycled into it. Federal buyback programs, they work great. People come and turn their guns in all the time. People need money, especially when you're facing a recession in the United States. There's ways to do it, It just needs legislation and people to have less of an attachment to their firearms, because I think that they're a status symbol. I mean, I used to joke about it from I do jujitsu. I've done boxing. I always thought it'd be really interesting. You watch the old kung fu movies. I don't know if you grew up on kung fu movies. That I did. But you watch these movies and you'll have a town in China or something where this is all set. And in this town, there'll be like 5 or 6 different martial arts schools. And each one of them, they all have members and they all kind of compete, kind of like gang warfare, but they all kind of compete over who has the best class and who has the best martial arts, teacher, and who has the best method. How much neater the world would be, in the United States would be, if the same amount of like fetishism towards firearms that American men have goes towards martial arts. If you had people in jujitsu classes, and you had people in boxing classes and karate classes and taekwondo classes and capoeira classes and all these different stuff, and it would increase our physical ability. I mean, it would increase a lot of our mental healths as well. It would increase a lot of I'm a subject of it with obesity here in America. It would be a lot better place.
Yeah.
And then one of the things you learn in martial arts is a code of honor too. So it would instill, like a sense of honor to a lot of it. It's just, I don't know. It's something I just kind of think about in a far off daydream land of a land without weapons like that.
Well, and it's definitely, like you said, I think it's up to us, right? Like, I don't know how many cycles I have to break, and like I said, it's not a fault of, not a fault of how I was raised. I think that I kind of believe in some woo-woo stuff, right? Like, kind of, if this was kind of like my calling, right, was to do some generational cycle breaking, right? And I think it is definitely up to us to come up with a new way of doing things, right? And going back to your point of ending up on some watch list because you download, say, a file for a 3D printed gun, right? Absolutely. And the sad part, though, is that what we're talking about right now, we're probably ending up on a watch list. And that's the sad reality of where we're at in America, right? Where we have to have conversations, right? Just like Donald Trump updated some of the frameworks for domestic terrorism, right? Where we are just spreading ideas and we're not trying to tell you what to think, we're trying to get people to think, and how that is suddenly more dangerous than this epidemic that we have right now. And it's a sad state of affairs when we have to have a podcaster's no-fly zone, right? Because we don't want to end up in Guantanamo. But
every
crazy.
Every piece of legislation that we have today, like even the amendments we're talking about to our Constitution, every piece of legislation we have today, we have because of progressive politics. We have because people didn't have those benefits and then fought for those benefits. And I mean fought for in a political sense. They went to the ballot boxes, they got people into the right positions that would do something, that wouldn't just sacrifice and roll over to their support people who gave them money for their campaigns or their own constituents that they look out for without looking out for the greater good of the whole. I'm looking at Lisa Murkowski out of fucking Alaska.
Wanted to carve out her own exemptions, right?
But the point I'm trying to make, though, is that, like, if you It's tough to put it into words because it's really frustrating because
It's a
there's so
power
many things.
dynamic. I know what you mean. It's that right now we have people who are pushing back against the status quo in the name of, if you have rights, if someone who doesn't look like you have rights, it means that you yourself have more rights too. And how, yeah, it's frustrating that,
Well, you have Donald Trump saying that anyone who questions or goes against his politics right now is, could be
an
labeled as
enemy,
a domestic terrorist, and it's
an
like, well,
enemy.
anyone who's trying to put forth any type of policies that would be labeled as progressive, and again, I remind you, every single law that's ever been put forward that benefited the country for U.S. amendments that are still around, those were considered progressive politics when they were put forth. There was a conservative faction that fought against it. I
Right.
guarantee it. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And so it's that's the thing, is like, to be told now by Donald Trump's administration that anyone who's against his administration politically is a domestic terrorist, and be labeled as a domestic terrorist. Not only does it have ring back to sounds to one party rule, but it also it prevents any form of progressive legislation from ever getting put forward, because everything would just be the status quo from then on forever.
Right. If you're not allowed to critique, then what is it even? And that's why I felt called to this podcast, as I'm sure you did as well, is that it goes back to, we're trying to spread our message that we think we're headed down a dark road, and we both don't want to live in a reality where we're right, and we would rather be wrong. But we're not going to be wrong because we were wrong. We were going to be wrong because we got people to think, and we're going to be
People
wrong
did
because
something.
it ended up thwarting evil and thwarting powerful plans that be, right? It's not going to be just because we were wrong. That's no way. Absolutely no way. So, heavy stuff, man. Heavy stuff. Just,
Yeah, I think there's so many things that can be implemented. We'd be remiss if we didn't mention, like red flag laws. I think you should have permitting. I think you should have police issued training towards everyone who's trying to purchase firearms. I was talking, John, to you earlier today, and we just made the joke about how you can purchase a long weapon in the in Washington State, a long gun, rifle, a shotgun, and there's a short waiting period. I think it's 3 to 5 days, something like that.
it's all
But then
different
there's
now, but historically, yeah, it's what it was. Yeah.
yeah, and there's absolutely no training you need to have for the weapon. But say if you want to apply to get a hunting license, you then need to take a gun safety certification program. And I just think that it's wild that you can purchase the weapon without a gun safety certification program, but you can't purchase the license without that.
Right.
There's so many things, there's so many laws that are created in the United States just to have it on the books, and then people just kind of let it go. Like that program is primarily little children, and it's like, hey, how to get over this fence while holding your rifle. Hand the rifle off to your friend. Don't ever point the rifle at someone else. Like it's for children.
Yeah.
But then you can look at it and you can say, oh, well this person was certified to own that weapon because they passed the safety exam. It sounds really good on paper, right? It sounds really good as a exculpatory. This isn't my fault. He was educated. He passed the test. Well, the test is a joke. And there's a lot of things like that too when it comes to firearm ownership. And there's you have 50 laws in this country, and 50 different 50 states in this country, and 50 different laws for each one of them. In Nevada, you can legally own a 50 caliber sniper rifle.
Hmm.
What would you need that for?
I remember when I bought my one of my first assault rifle platforms, I had a nice underfolder AK, very desirable one. And my grandfather, who is also the founder of the pawn shop that my dad works at, he saw me have that, and he's like, "What do you need that for, kid? Like, what are you gonna do with that?" And I'm like, "I don't know. It's fun to have." And it's like, so like there are echoes of this throughout the generations, right? Like, what do you need that for? And at the time, it didn't. I was just like, I'm a gun nut. Like, I just want more to pack in my safe, right? At a gun cabinet, it wasn't a real safe. I packed as many in there as I could, right? But I look at it and it's like, I don't know. I don't know what I don't know what I need it
Uh,
for. I mean, it's definitely not the most comfortable thing to shoot. It's got a metal stock. So
John, what happens though when you're at work one day and someone breaks into your guys' house and breaks open your safe and steals all your guns? It's like even if you are the safest gun owner, if people know you own them and they know they're in the home, that could happen. And so like what I'm trying to say is like even if you're the most respectful person with your an AK or a respectful person with an AR-14 or an AR, it still opens a possibility, just like you said earlier, where it's if you buy a weapon, you're the most likely person to be shot with that weapon.
you are,
Whereas if
just
you own a weapon,
statistically speaking.
yeah, if you own a weapon, you are likely to have it stolen from you at some point in time. That's just a
Mhm.
fact of owning anything.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, if you can't answer the question of why do you need it, and it's like, well, it's just cool to have. I want to put it in my safe. It's like, okay, well, it's just another one laying around.
I
It's
know, right? I know,
and
and
like
that's the thing. That's that Jim Jeffries joke, right? So that's
yeah,
really the only argument that we have, and that's kind of what we're trying to say with the ethos of America, right?
and
And
even then, under what I say too. If you like guns and you wanna have guns, you're a gun nut. Maybe you work at a gun store. Maybe you're former military and you own your own armory, something like that. That's all cool. All those should be registered, all those should be permitted, all those should be of a specific caliber limits, all those should be of specific size regulations, and they all should you should be checked up on every couple months just to make sure you're mentally okay. That should be what happens.
no,
That's just the stigmas of that industry. There's stigmas for every industry. I work in gardening. I work in agriculture industry. A lot of my customers work in cannabis. There's stigmas in every industry. I've spent my life overcoming a lot of stigmas. But there's some stigmas are born out of factual, truth. And if the byproduct of the cannabis industry is that we can't use central banking, so everything has to be done with cash. Every business has to be run with cash. That's the byproduct of that industry. If the byproduct of the American gun ownership industry is you have to be well regulated, like it says in the Constitution, that's the sacrifice you make for that right. Is it's well regulated.
no. So
I also don't think anyone should own a 50 caliber sniper rifle. I don't see the point in that.
yeah.
I need a
Well,
sniper rifle, John, one that could shoot through trees.
yeah, right. Well, and I think that, yeah, I don't know where I'm going with this thought, but it's just a matter of we haven't really in a domestic deal or like an invasion of the homeland, they haven't been used. Like, have they not been used because we've been a deterrent like the armed populace? I don't
No,
know.
I definitely don't think that at all. You the there's just the simple faction of numbers. The how was the Russian family that was deposed, the Romanovs, they were deposed by serfs. They were deposed by starving peasants. The thing that every government should fear is its own people. And not like in a sense of, oh, we have more guns than you. Because again, the government has cruise missiles. The point is the government is run by citizens. And if citizens can get into positions of power that will limit the ownership or more regulate the ownership of firearms in this country, I think that's a good thing. When the Constitution was written and the founding fathers put in, the not even the founding fathers, because it's an amendment, so they had to have it amended to have it in with the right to bear arms. That was under the threat of the War of 1812. When was the last time that the United States had to fear for invasion on the homeland, on the home front? War of 1812.
Yeah.
Again, go join a militia. Well-regulated one.
Many of these other Western societies that have put the kibosh on the military style weapons, I think many of them still allow for, hunting purposes and for sporting purposes, but even those are a lot more highly regulated, right? Because look at, I mean, if we believe what the FBI is saying about Charlie Kirk, which I don't really believe, but the weapon used was a bolt action, something that's definitely
The weapon that was supposedly used was a 30-06, which is an elk hunting rifle, a rifle meant to take down not just like big game, but like take down big game humanely, because how quickly and how devastating it is.
Yeah, well, the 30-06
I think
was the M1 Grand round was a 30-06, I believe. Yeah, that's for those of you that don't know, a 30-06, like Randall's saying, it is. You can go buy a 30-06 at Walmart, and that thing, if a person gets hit by that, it is absolutely devastating.
Unless you're, I know this isn't our Charlie Kirk episode, but unless you're Charlie Kirk, because according to the doctor who tried to save him, the bullet that shot him was stopped by his neck bones, which, just to put in perspective again, those rounds are specifically made to go through bones of elk, which are like 6 times stronger than a human's.
From similar distances. Have you seen
we don't know a lot, I don't think, about that specific assassination, but yeah,
have you seen more and more
not
about
really making a lot of sense.
Have you seen more and more that people are saying that it could have been his lapel? Have you seen that?
No.
And that so if you go back and watch the video, it makes sense. If you have the original, the close-up original, you can see from here to here, and it is pretty damning, in my opinion. And then you go down the rabbit hole of his security company was also what company or what country was the security company from?
Israel. Yeah.
So,
and just like that, I'm on a list.
We are on a list. Yep. And isn't it crazy? We were probably towing the list all up until now, but in America, where we have 2 flags flying behind our leaders. Absolutely insane.
Yeah. It's interesting because Israel is also the country, I believe, that was responsible for putting a bunch of bombs in people's pagers and then calling them, and detonating them all over, which injured, to my knowledge, not only a bunch of high level, people that they were going after, but injured a bunch of like civilians, like walking around next to people. There was that one famous one of the woman who got like caught on fire in the supermarket. She was standing next to the counter that it was sitting on when it went off.
And this was the long game, right? They sold those. It was to Yemen, right? Was it to Yemen or to Lebanon?
It was Yemen, I think.
They sold those pagers, and those bombs were planted since they were sold. That's the long game, the long game, right? It's just it's wild, right? So
wouldn't be the first time that the covert operation in order to stir up American politics. Bibi Netanyahu's been in charge of Israel on and off as prime minister. I think he's on his 3rd term as prime minister, I believe, for 17 years. And for my entire adult life, I've thought of him as the leader of Israel. And it's kind of interesting because like a lot of the things that have happened under his administration, like he had just got found out that he had been paying for weapons to get brought into Palestine. Did you hear about this? He's so Bibi Netanyahu's being investigated because he supplied weapons to Hamas, and it's like, this is the leader of Israel. It's like, why is he doing that? And it's like, oh, well, because if he has a boogeyman to fight against, it makes his electorate want to elect him again. So he always has that threat of Hamas to be kind of being like, oh, well, there's Hamas that now has all these weapons and money that they got out of Qatar. There's literal suitcases full of money getting brought into the back of these cars getting brought into Palestine. And then those suitcases of money paid for tunnels to get dug, and weapons to get purchased and rockets to get purchased. And so then he's literally, if you can look at it that way, Benjamin Netanyahu, who's currently still, while being prime minister and raging a war in Israel, is being investigated for his corruption trials, which are meant to last like another 2 years. And in that corruption trials is how he was doing deals with Qatar to bring weapons and money into Palestine in order to fund Hamas. I made Star Trek episodes about this shit, man.
No.
Deep Space Nine. The Cardassians. They were the bad guys. Look it up. Look it up.
The Armenians? You're talking about?
The damn Cardassians.
Oh, Cardassians. Oh.
Cardassians.
Cardassians.
Gold Dukat. They took over Bajor. I know way too much about Star Trek.
I'm not a Star Trek fan, so.
All right.
Anyway. Yeah. Anyways, we are the Knights of the Wrong Table podcast. Thanks for joining in today. And just as kind of a little signing off note, right? We are not telling you what to think. We are trying to get you to think, in similar ways or to just question things, right? We're not trying to tell you what to think. We don't necessarily have all the solutions. We're just here talking. So
just
thanks
to
for
start
tuning
a discourse. If you don't agree with what we say, tell us that, come on the podcast, get by a webcam, come on the podcast and tell us it and explain why. Let's have a political discourse that doesn't lead to just arguments in the chat rooms and stuff. It's if you feel passionate about what you believe, then come on and explain why.
Yeah. Yep. We're not trying. I said it before. We're not trying to put people's info out there. We're not trying just to get a one-up. We do want to genuinely have people on who would want to articulate where they're coming from, right? And for us to be able to have that civil conversation, right? And it might be that we learn something, might be that you learn something. And we want to be able to continue that dialogue in the forum that is still uniquely American. We still have the First Amendment. And
while we have the ability to do it.
While we have the ability to do it, because I know that I don't want to live in an America where we don't have the ability to. And if what we're doing right now is dangerous, if having discourse is dangerous, then so be it. So, okay. See you next week.
Have a good one.